Revenge films.
I have two older brothers, and my eldest brother just announced that he was getting married. My brother introduced us to his fiancée, and she was a lovely person. We were all so happy for them. My brother and his fiancée were getting ready to send out the wedding invitations, but then my brother received a call from his wedding planner.
We just received a call from your mother asking us to cancel your wedding. Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not. Please, hold off until I have a word with my mother.
My brother drove an hour to go speak to my mother at her house. The rest of us gathered and we held a family meeting. We were all shocked by my mother's words. She told us that she and my father had planned on holding a wedding at a nice venue like theirs. But then her in-laws canceled the reservation at the wedding venue. In the end, she and my father got married at the house of my father's parents. My mother was very unhappy about this because she wanted to hold a wedding at a venue of her choice. Her in-laws allowed her to wear a traditional kimono for the occasion, but her hair and makeup was done by my father's older sister, my aunt, and my mother was not happy about the outcome. My mother was also unhappy about the fact that she didn't get to choose her own wedding guests. Her father-in-law had made the arrangements and invited all of his relatives and neighbors. In contrast, my mother was only allowed to invite a few guests. My mother thought that it would only be fair that my brother's fiancé receive the same treatment as her. I thought that my mother would be understanding of a woman's desires to hold her dream wedding, but instead, she was doing the exact opposite and forcing my brother's fiancé to go through the same bad experience that she had. I thought that my mother was being ridiculous. My brothers agreed with me. My father sat next to my mother, not saying a word. If your fiancé is adamant about having her wedding at the venue, I want the wedding there at the same time as you two. That was a crazy idea. I never heard of two weddings being held at the same time, and the parents of the groom getting married at the same time as their son. We all told her that it was an incredibly stupid idea, but then my mother started crying. She was acting like a child. It's not fair that I never got my dream wedding, but my son and his fiancé do. To that, my husband had nothing to say.
If you're so desperate for a wedding, why not have one now? There's no reason for you to ruin our brother's wedding for your selfish reasons.
But to that, my father protested.
I'm past 60. There's no need for me to get dressed up as a groom and have a second wedding. That would make me look like an idiot.
My mom was even more upset when she heard my father say this. My first wedding wasn't an actual wedding. I didn't get to invite who I wanted. You had all your relatives and friends there. I didn't. Are you going to make me spend the rest of my life regretting the fact that I never got a proper wedding? My father couldn't say anything back to my mother. For my mother, my brother getting engaged was the perfect opportunity for her to start planning the wedding that she never got. We all told her to her face that she was being absurd, but she wouldn't listen. The family meeting turned into a family argument, and we weren't able to resolve the issue at hand. My brother has no plans to cancel his wedding, but my mother called his wedding planner every day, urging her to cancel her son's upcoming wedding. The wedding planner always gave my mother the same response. She would say,
I will check with your son about that.
But my mother didn't give up. She began to buy wedding magazines and cut out photos of her favorite dresses. Do you think that this kind of style is too young for me? What about this one? Will this color go well with my skin too? Had my mother gone senile? It was her son's wedding, but she was pretending that it was her wedding that was coming up. My father continued to ignore my mother's irrational behavior. Mom, why don't you and Dad plan your own wedding on a different date? We would be okay with that. Or maybe you can both get dressed up and take some wedding photos. Wouldn't that be nice? What's wrong with me having a wedding the same day as my son?
How many times do I have to tell you that I don't want to get dressed up as a groom? It's embarrassing!
I felt really bad for my brother and his fiancée. My brother's fiancée was really nice. This wedding was supposed to be about her, but she didn't complain about my mother's insane behavior. If I were in her shoes, I'd be pissed off at my mother-in-law to be. I didn't understand why my mother was making such a big deal out of this. If my future parents-in-law suggested a joint wedding, I'd rethink marrying my fiancé altogether. Or if I asked them for permission to have a joint wedding with my parents, my future parents-in-laws would be equally shocked. And the guests of my brother's fiancé would wonder why they were being forced to attend the wedding of two strangers. My parents were over 60 years old. Shouldn't they be acting like adults here? My brother and I have been giving money to our parents ever since we all got jobs. My eldest brother gave the largest amount to my parents, and I thought that my mother should be more considerate of his feelings. She was being selfish. Since my brother gave my parents a considerate amount of money each month, he didn't have much savings, so his fiancée and her family had kindly offered to pay for most of the wedding fees. I was touched by my brother's fiancée's kindness. Not only was she putting up with my mother's behavior, but she was also paying for the wedding. But my mother didn't seem to see things that way. My brother was strict towards my brother's fiancé and made it seem like it was my brother's fiancé's duty to listen to everything that my mother asked for. I was starting to think that my mother wanted to have her wedding on the same day as my brother so that she could get my brother's fiancé to pay for all of the costs, including my mother's wedding. And now my mother was starting to make selfish demands about the wedding. My brother's fiancé was paying for the wedding so that she could be the one that decides on how the wedding should be. From the perspective of my brother-in-laws, my mother was a stranger to them. I don't think that they would be happy about paying for my mother's wedding as well. If they had some extra money, I'm sure they'd prefer to spend it on their daughters and not my mother. My brother continued to persuade my mother to have her wedding on a different date. No matter what he said, my mother wouldn't change her mind, and we didn't understand why she was being so stubborn. I could relate to the fact that my mother was upset about not being able to have her own dream wedding when she was younger. But this gave her no reason to ruin my brother's wedding. If anything, she should be more supportive and help give my brother and his fiancée the perfect wedding. I was also annoyed with my father, who protested in his own way, but didn't have the courage to tell my mother that what she was doing was wrong. This argument was going nowhere, and I felt sorry for my brother. In the end, he gave in and said,
Fine. If you won't change your mind about this, I have no choice but to cancel my wedding.
I was surprised things had come to this, but when I spoke to my brother later, he told me that he was going to secretly have his wedding overseas and not invite our parents. I thought that this was a good idea. The wedding planner contacted my mother to let her know that my brother had canceled his wedding.
We received a call from your son asking us to cancel his wedding.
I guess my mother never thought that would come to this. She panicked and gave me and my brothers a call. Don't tell me that you're not having a wedding at all. If you change the location, you need to let me know. I'm your mother. What's wrong with having our wedding at the same time? We're family, remember? I would have been okay if she were only persisting her immediate family, but we found out that she had been calling my brother's fiancé as well. This was unacceptable. How could you two do this to me? Were you the one that convinced my son to change the venue of the wedding? You can't hide this from me. I'm going to be your mother-in-law. Show some respect. If you can't be kind to me, I'm going to get my son to call off the engagement. My mother threatened my brother's fiancé, and she became so stressed out that she couldn't get out of bed. My brother was furious about this and wasn't going to forgive our mother. He stopped sending my parents money after he found out about what my mother had done to his fiancé.
If being your family is going to cause me so much trouble, I'm cutting you two out of my life. Mom, I will never forgive you for what you did to my fiancé. You bullied and threatened her. This was supposed to be a happy time for her, but you ruined it.
When my brother told my parents that he was cutting them out of his life, my father finally realized just how bad the situation had become.
This is all your fault. Look at what happened.
No, this is all your fault. You always prioritized your feelings over mine. I deserve to have my dream wedding too. My other brother and I also sent money to our parents each month, but the majority of my parents' living expenses were paid by my eldest brother. Now that my eldest brother was cutting off our parents, they were going to have trouble paying for their living expenses.
Son, we can't live without your financial support. I apologize for your mother's irrational behavior. You still have your pension. Cut back on some expenses and make do. Our pension alone isn't going to be enough money. Look at what you did! How are we supposed to go on living without their support?
You should have given me the wedding that I wanted in the first place. If you had, none of this would have happened. This isn't my fault. We couldn't bear to watch our parents fight over something so stupid, and we were happy with our decisions to cut all ties with them. We felt that our parents were perfect for each other. Both of them failed to see how selfish they were being. After my brother's fiancé felt better, my brother had an intimate wedding without our parents. Our parents got in touch with us frequently, asking us to send them cash, but we continued to ignore them.
We don't have enough money to get by. Please send us some money.
My parents were not grateful for the fact that their children had been financially supporting them for years. It was time for them to become financially independent. My mother should have never tried to sabotage my brother's wedding, and my father should have stopped my mother from acting all crazy. After my brother was married, he built a large house and began his new life with his wife and her parents. My other brother moved to a different part of the country to start a new project for work. I also moved to a new location because I wanted to be as far away as possible from my parents. I later found out from a relative that my parents have gotten divorced, but I didn't care. I didn't consider either of them to be my family anymore.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.